let's talk now. Let's get into the beef of this weekend. Are you ready to deliver functional medicine? How many of you have seen this diagram before? You've been following me for any length of time. If you watched our recent Autoimmune Revolution Summit, you saw this diagram. Chemical, emotional, spiritual, and physical. These are the three primary elements that I talk to patients about as it pertains to functional medicine. And if you haven't seen my full video clip on what this triangle actually means, you should go watch it. And you can get this video off of YouTube. If you type in Triangle of Health Dr. Osborne on YouTube, you'll find a video. And I want you to look this video up because it's a video at the end of the weekend. You want one actionable tool that you can take back to your practice. If you learn how to explain this diagram to your patients with skill and great communication, you'll increase your compliance more than 50% in your practice. It's one of the most valuable tools that you can use for patient compliance is to explain what functional medicine is in an easy-to-understand way, and this triangle is what does that. But when I ask you if you're ready to deliver functional medicine, what I really mean is, are you dialed in to your functional medicine message? No one wants financial advice from the guy living in the cardboard box. You know what I mean? If you want financial advice, who do you go to seek out to get financial advice from? Do you go to the plumber? Do you go to the roofer? You don't go to the bum. You go to the expert. You go to the guy who has more money than anyone else, because if he's got more than anyone else, he probably knows a little bit about what he's talking about, right? So when I ask you if you're dialed into your message, do you do functional medicine with your own self? Do you practice what you preach? One of the biggest ways to quick failure is to tell your patients how much they need functional medicine, but not set the bar and the example for them. People need leaders, and actions speak louder than words. And so, if you're not dialed into your own message, this is a challenge that I have for any of you in the room. If you're struggling and you're not dialed into it, take it upon yourself to get dialed in and use your own success story as a marketing tool for your practice. Practice what you teach your patients to do. The term doctor in Latin is derivative for teacher. Now, a teacher is a student. How do we learn? How do we as practitioners learn? We practice on ourselves, sure. How else? We learn by doing. Do we learn by practicing with our patients? So I want you to think about this right here. Why does teacher equal student? Because if you know everything there is to know, and you shut your mind off to learning more, then what happens? Stagnancy, lack of growth. So to be a doctor, you have to be a teacher, but to be a good teacher, you have to be a perpetual student. And our best teachers in practice are our patients. So this is a mutual relationship that we share with our patients. We are the doctor to our patients, but our patients are the doctor to us as well. So you always have to keep your mind open to being that student, because all of this right here is what leads to practice, and practicing over time leads to wisdom, and wisdom over time leads to experience, and experience applied and multiplied equals success. So, if we back up just here, so let's go through this triangle. You got chemical, and this is nutritional and from the environment. So most of you know biochemistry, right? Vitamins, minerals, food, carbohydrates, fats, proteins. The chemical aspect is food additives. It's the chemicals that our patients are exposed to on a daily basis. those things that could either help them or hurt them in ways that we don't physically see with our eyes, right? It's the anatomy on a microscopic scale, right? And so, are you leading by example? Is your practice an extension of your recommendations? Again, thinking about your practice, functional medicine for your practice. Physical. Appearance does matter. In your practice, if you dress in ratty scrubs, no offense to anyone if you're currently doing that, but if you dress in ratty scrubs to visit with your patients, that's not the appropriate platform in functional medicine. You should have a professional appearance. How many of you are surgeons? How many of you do surgery? So I see one hand going up. Okay, so scrubs are for surgery. You scrub in, right? So in your practice, dress professional, dress for success. Take care of yourself, right? Your physical appearance matters. If you walk up to a person, the first thing that's going to happen in the first 10 seconds is what? Do you think they're going to judge you before they've met you? 100% of people judge on physical appearance. It's the reality. And you can talk about prejudice in a perfect world and everything else, but the reality is your patients are going to judge you the second you walk in the room. And if you walk in the room with a wrinkled shirt, if you walk in the room in ratty-looking scrubs, if you walk in the room with an unkempt beard, or if you're a guy, or if ratty hair if you're a girl, or just throwing yourself up in a ponytail, not dressing professionally, your patients are going to already start questioning you on a subconscious level. So physically, take care of yourself. Hygiene, exercise. How many of you tell your patients to exercise? Okay, so how many of you tell your patients to exercise but don't exercise yourself? So like if you're saying, okay, I want you to do high-intensity interval training 4 to 5 times a week, how many of you do high-intensity interval training 4 to 5 times a week? Or if you're asking your patient to do yoga, how many of you actually know yoga moves? How many of you actually know how to do that yoga? Right? So my point is simply this. Whatever the recommendation you're going to have, you should have a skill set, not just a book set. A book set is I read about it and it sounds good and in theory it should work. But a skill set is I've done it, I've applied it, I've seen it applied in many patients. We can say that there's an objective outcome on the end of this. And so if you're going to speak it, if you're going to teach it, you should know how to do it. You should know how to, if you're in a room with a patient and they say, I don't really know how to do a squat, and you can't break down right there and show them how to do a proper squat, then how are you qualified to give them advice? So this goes back to your, as a functional medicine doctor, it's about physical, chemical, and emotional, spiritual. And if you are the brainiac here, but you lack knowledge here, or you lack credentialing here, or you lack functional ability there, you need to work that out. And then we have the emotional, spiritual side. Are your hearts and minds where they should be? We talk about money this weekend, and that's one of those things that a lot of doctors are like, whoa, I can't talk about money with my patient, or no, I'm not going to talk about money. And because they think of money as this evil thing in the world. But if your practice is aligned with your beliefs, in other words, if your core values are what you practice, then you're solid here. And then you can ask your patients to line themselves up with their core values. How many of you have ever had a patient who was in an abusive relationship or had a job that they hated? Anybody ever had a patient had a job they hated? Okay. How many of you have ever told your patients to quit their job? Good. So, how many of you in here hate your job? Hopefully none of you. Raise your hand. My point is your personal, emotional, spiritual fulfillment should project onto your patients. So if you're not being emotionally and spiritually fulfilled, they're going to read that. People will read you. Again, subconsciously, they're going to read you as the doctor, and they're going to be judging you and evaluating you for where you're at. And that's how they're going to help determine the decision as to whether or not they're going to spend the money in your practice. So, mindset and philosophy. Who's heard the saying, the customer's always right? Who believes the saying, the customer is always right? Is the customer always right? Absolutely not. A big part of your practice is attracting the right patients not just attracting patients. Anyone here ever fired a patient? Anyone here ever been scared to fire a patient and didn't fire a patient because they were scared because they needed the money and they just needed to continue to see the patient? How many of you have ever been stuck in an insurance model of practice? Okay, that's what insurance models of practice are, is that you're running and churning patients through a system, right? And you've figured out the paperwork part of it, and you know that the care that's being delivered, although it might be great care that you're delivering, the care itself is being dictated by what an insurance company will pay for and not by what your true recommendations might actually be, right? So we don't want an office full of patients who want to pay a $10 copay. Can we all agree on that? Right? Because if we attract that kind of patient, what are we going to be stuck in? We're going to be stuck in an insurance mentality, right? If somebody's coming to you and they're used to that $10 copay and you're asking them to spend $4,000 or $5,000, what do you think is going to happen? They're going to walk away? Right. So there's a little something called market to message match. If the people that are in your office are the right kinds of people, they're going to spend what you want them to spend in order for you to get the information that you need to help them get better. But if the people in your office are expecting to pay a $10 copay and nothing more, that's not a good fit for a functional medicine practice. You can't keep a functional medicine practice alive in an insurance model. Now, you can have a hybridized model, and if you're in insurance, you can do a slow transition over to functional medicine. That makes business sense. But you've got to attract the right patients. So aligning you with your vision is critical to creating the practice that you want versus the practice that you have. How many of you already have the practice that you want? Like everything about your practice that you're in is ideal. So no hands went up. Okay, I'm going to raise my hand. No, in all seriousness, you want the practice that you want. And we had a private mastermind meeting earlier today, and one of our docs in the room said something to me that was very, very true, and that if you align yourself with your core values and you build your business around your core values, around what you want. Why did I have you visualize the perfect day? The perfect day is not scrambling to try to squeeze 30 people in and then having a frantic biller come at you saying, Medicare has stopped all of our payments for the last 6 months and they owe us $40,000 and we don't know if we're going to get that money and we might not be able to make overhead. Is that the ideal day? No, it's not the ideal day. The ideal day is whatever you want it to be. It's whatever you want it to be, and there is no wrong answer there. But you have to create that. You have to align yourself with that vision. You have to have that vision in your own mind of what that ideal practice wants to look like. And this is so important because you don't want to compromise yourself to make a buck. How many of you have ever been in the position to compromise yourself to make money? You're like, I know that I'm going to make this recommendation. I've done it. I mean, in chiropractic practice very early on, we did a high-volume practice. And at first, it sounded like a really good idea, and we implemented it for about a year until I was like, this is a horrible idea. I don't even know what I'm doing. I've lost my way. So, you don't want to put yourself in a position where you compromise your values or your ethics or your morals, or you compromise what you want. And so the patient is not always right. You want to attract the right kind of patients based on the practice that you want, not necessarily the practice that you have, but in order to do that, you have to define the practice that you want. Does that make sense? So part of this is visualization. What is that practice that you want? Because if you have the practice that you want, you have fulfillment. How many of you feel like there's something missing, like there's a hole, right? And part of filling that hole is creating that practice that you want. And when you have that, what does that do in your office? When you love going to work on Monday morning, like how many of you love Monday morning, like can't wait? Or how many of you are like, you know what, I wish I had one more day, maybe 5 or 10 more days. You know what, I wish I could just close that thing down, right? We've all been there. If you're not there currently, I was there at one point. But I love Monday mornings because I'm recharged and I'm excited and I've got a whole book full of patients that need me and that want me. And they're the right patients. And I know I'm not going to have to convince anybody to get care. There is no convincing if you dial in who you are and what you want. There's no convincing to be had. You don't have to convince anyone of anything. And when you have that kind of office, What do you think that does with your staff, with your team? It's high energy. It's high energy. Energy is palpable and it spreads, right? So the more energy you have, the more excitement you have on a Monday morning, a Tuesday morning, a Wednesday morning, the happier your staff become. The more on mission they are. The more excited they are to talk with your patients. The more excited they are to help get your patients through a challenging time. So you want that palpable vibe in your office.